So I've decided that I'm going to be doing a new series where we're going over some of the Christian movies that have come out as of late, because some of them have been actually really, really well done. And so we're going to go over our first film that I watched called Nefarious. Nefarious stars Sean Patrick Flannery and Jordan Belfi. This movie is labeled as Christian horror, um, but it's not so much in like bloody or gory. That's pretty much none of that. So the premise of the movie is that Sean Patrick Flannery, his character, who his name is Edward, he is a convicted killer who is on death row and about to be sentenced to death. But Jordan Belfi's character, who plays Dr. James Martin, he is the psychologist who basically has to have one last interview with Edward to determine whether or not he can actually stand and be present for the death penalty, or if he's clinically insane, which would actually get him out of it. And so, upon arriving at the prison, Dr. James is informed that Edward is going to try to convince him that he is insane, that he's a master manipulator, right? That he's a genius, right? And that he's again going to try to convince him that he's insane. And so when the two men finally meet, the the twist here, right, and where it goes to Christian horror, and we get into now like the supernatural element, is that Edward tells Dr. James that he is actually a demon called Nefarious. And so that's basically the main premise of the movie. I'm not sure if I want to start doing like spoilers in my reviews. I really don't, because I want people to go into it completely like blind. But I will say this movie is an example of what can be done with Christianity as far as like storytelling. That we don't have to rely on, okay, everything's got, okay, you're a Christian, okay, there's got to be a church, right? There's got to be, there's got to be pastors, and there's got to be someone who's like addicted to drugs, and all this stuff. Like there's none of that present like in this movie. But it is a faith-based centered movie. And I would say that the one person who gives the most talking points for Christianity is actually the demon, Nefarious. Uh, uh, he gives so many. There are so many speeches. One that he talks about the creation story. Other one that he talks about the different sins that people in today's modern day are operating in and working in, right? There are so many different speeches that he gives that are so good. They're so well written. They're so well performed. Sean Patrick Flannery, phenomenal. I know I've seen him in something else. I just can't remember what I've seen him in, right? Um, but he did a phenomenal job in this role, like phenomenal. And he basically plays both Nefarious and Edward, right? Who we definitely find, I don't know if this is a spoiler, right? But we are made aware that Nefarious is definitely in control of Edward. And so there are moments in which we are talking and Dr. James is talking to Edward. Um, and then he'll switch back to like Nefarious. And the fact that, the actor Sean Patrick, he can play both of those roles, and they're so opposed to one another, right? Obviously, you're a demon in one, and then you're this other person who knows that he's bound by this demon and is very much afraid. Just really, really well done. Really, really well acted. And the funny thing is that it's so I say that it's the biggest talking points are coming from the demon, right? Is because he's talking to Dr. James, who is an atheist in the movie. And so he's basically giving him all of like the points of why it's so dumb to be an atheist. And showing the moral contradictions, right? Because there's a series of events that happens in the movie that are there to show the moral contradictions of Dr. James and how, hey, you're actually not as good as you actually think you are, you profess to be. And that professing to be an atheist is not some like, you're just up on your high horse. But it's not really something to actually like be to actually celebrate, right? It's actually a point of like weakness. And there's that demonstration that happens through a series of events in that movie towards Dr. James. Um, but the ending was very, very interesting. Um, Ultimately, what happens and what you think is supposed to happen, or what you're told is going to happen to Edward, right, ends up happening. But there's a life change moment for Dr. James where he comes out of it, again, not as the character that he was at the beginning of the movie. And I'll say this to the film's credit, because in most of these Christian movies, right, when the quote unquote unsaved person becomes saved, right, you see like the whole change, and now they're like walking right, with God and walking right. That actually doesn't happen in this movie. Dr. James, while he's changed, right, he's not the person that he was at the beginning of the movie, but because of the series of events, he's more shaken than anything else, where he's just now uncertain. And I actually appreciated that, knowing that this was a Christian movie made by Christians, where it wasn't showing, okay, now this guy's just in church and now he's a Christian, and because I think that that's actually not realistic. I think for a lot of people, there are encounters, there are things that happen that are starting points to them getting into, the faith, right? Getting into relationship with Christ. But it doesn't happen overnight. I know plenty of people who are saved and, are walking in relationship with Christ and with the Lord right now. But their salvation story, it took like months. It took this. It took they were digging, they were searching. Some of them were searching scriptures and trying to learn and answer these questions, and then ultimately got to a place where it's like, okay, you know what? I think this is true, and I want to walk in Christianity, and I want to give my life over to Christ, right? So I appreciated that Dr. James, while he has changed, right, and I would say that he's moved over towards God, he's not fully there at the end of the movie. And I think that actually shows a true depiction of what happens, I think, to a lot of people. And so I really enjoy this movie. I would give it a solid 8 out of 10, right? If you haven't watched it, go watch it. I know I'm kind of late to the game here. And so if you have seen Nefarious, like, let me know what your thoughts are on it. I thought it was really, really solid. I think this is a good example, again, of how Christian content, when it comes to like entertainment, we're kind of turning a corner. We're not there are more companies now who are making actually good, engaging movies, shows, than there were in the past, right? I think, and it's probably because, like me, they all collectively looked at those things and was like, guys, it's just really, really, really cheesy. I think there's a better, more grounded, realistic way that we can just like do stuff. And so let's do it. And so, like, here we are. So it's really, really well done. Highly recommend. 8 out of 10. But let me know your thoughts. If you watched it, let me know what you thought about it. If you haven't watched it, again, I recommend that you do. But as always, guys, I appreciate you guys so much. Take it easy. Peace.